Hello and welcome. I'm Jennifer Shlomovich, and I specialize in helping busy women simplify plant-based living so they can improve their health, save time, and feel supported, even if their family isn't on board. Here on my channel, you'll find insightful interviews with inspiring vegans and practical tips on a variety of plant-based topics. Whether you're just starting out or looking to deepen your journey, my mission is to be your supportive resource and guide. Subscribe now and join me in living a healthier, more confident plant-based life. One of the biggest challenges vegans have is communicating their passion for veganism with non-vegans, which is why today I'm going to discuss vegan messaging with my special guest, Cleoniki Kesidis, who is a copywriter and messaging strategist who specializes in helping course creators build sales systems that get them consistent income. Cleoniki is also a vegan and loves working with businesses that are having a positive impact. Welcome, Cleoniki.
Hello, thank you for having me, Jennifer. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you here as well. We connected a few weeks ago, and yeah, I'm so happy we were able to find some time to talk about this very important topic.
Yeah, I'm very excited. I have lots of thoughts to share with you.
I'm looking forward to hearing all about them. And so before we get started, can you share a little bit about your vegan story?
I've been vegan for over 10 years now, and the reason I can't give you an exact date is I became vegan very slowly. So I started in university, and started with, went to vegetarian, then went to vegan, but for a very long time, I was a vegan only in private. Because when I was with people, and especially once I graduated, I started my new job, I'm trying to make new friends. I felt too shy and too insecure to openly be vegan with the new people that I was meeting, and with my sort of new acquaintances. Even with family, it took me a while, several trips back home before I decided that I was gonna have vegan food even at my parents' house. Um, so yeah, that's something really close to my heart, is that I think it's really important that we're able to be authentic to ourselves and that we feel confident eating the way we want to, but it can be really hard if you feel shy, if you're trying to, blend in, trying to meet new people, trying to get along with people at work or in your family. Um, which is why I'm really excited that we're talking today about how to talk about veganism and how to be open about that and how to communicate that in a way that feels ethical and aligned and authentic to you and is going to hopefully land well with people you're talking to.
I love all of that and can relate so much to what you just shared because it took me about 2 years to transition being vegan. It started off with wanting to eliminate dairy in my diet and noticing I felt better, to then discovering, looking up dairy-free recipes, finding a lot of vegan ones, realizing that this was more exciting than the food I was making beforehand. There's so much creativity and just all kinds of uses of spices and cuisines from all over the world that I didn't make before, even know to make. Um it started with the food and then wanting to just eat healthier and be healthier. And then, we know where meat comes from, but there's that cognitive dissonance because that we have growing up, especially if you grow up in a home where, eating meat is standard. You don't think twice about it going to the grocery store. And I started watching documentaries and really starting to think about those things I didn't think about before. And, I have a blended family, and at the time our kids were younger, and I knew no one would want to be vegan with me. And how do I even go about doing that? And feeling self-conscious, like what are friends going to say? Well, would we go to family's house? And as someone who's a recovering people pleaser, a lot of areas I don't people please anymore, but that was an area that was like, oh my God, it was like so intimidating
Mhm.
until I finally reached that point within myself where I didn't care what anyone thought and I need to honor myself. Um, and that's why created the Confident Vegan, because wherever you are in the journey, if you're someone who would like to become vegan or someone who's already vegan, it can feel very lonely when you don't have other vegans to connect with, and can feel isolating and stressful. And so by having support for people, and that's why I love have people share their stories because everyone has their story and how they became veganism, and there's no right or wrong way, and there's no good or bad. I think I always focus on progress over perfection and however long it takes you. And even if you're not there yet, just reducing the amount of animal stuff that you're consuming and purchasing, it all helps in some way.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh, what inspired you to get into the work that you do?
Yeah, so for my copywriting work, I've always loved writing, and I actually had several different careers before I ended up here, um, which again comes back to the confidence thing of being able to really admit that writing was what I wanted to do. But yeah, once I started freelance writing, I quickly found copywriting and dove into that, and I absolutely love how many interesting people I get to work with. It's really fun. So I work with people right now. I'm working with people who are course creators, and I get to help them figure out how to communicate with their audience. And it's been such an exploration and so valuable for so many other parts of my life as well, because you really learn how to communicate, how people think, how to bridge that divide, how to reach out to people, and try to encourage them to take a particular action that you want them to take. That's what copywriting is all about, which absolutely applies so much to people who are vegan, whether what you're trying to do is just simply get, respected and left alone and not bothered at the family meal, or whether you're trying to encourage someone who is maybe open to it to consider eating some more vegan food themselves.
That is also important because it's all in how you say it, right? You can, how we say something, how we communicate something is either going to trigger somebody, make them want to be defensive, or at least be open to, respecting the differences of somebody else. And so I liked how you mentioned how it can just be about getting respect,
Mhm.
right? Because a lot of times it takes us as vegans to transition. It takes time to do that. So we can't expect other people to
Mhm.
see things the way we do, and it can be frustrating, for sure. But just sometimes shifting that focus and instead of trying to make this person see
Yeah.
what you see, it could just be as simple as the basic need of respect, right? Like you don't have to agree with my veganism, but you can at least respect my veganism. So I'm really glad you brought that up.
Yeah, yeah. For a lot of us, especially if we're early in our vegan journey, that's all we're asking for, right? It's just, like leave me alone as I as I figure this out and I'm trying something new, and when you're just new to it and you're learning about it, you might not be sure yet if this is for you, for like you're just dabbling your toes, and that's a point where you're a little bit vulnerable, I think.
Yeah.
Anytime we try something new, that's a vulnerable act. And sometimes, obviously it's great if the people we love can support us, but if that's just not going to happen, then yeah, just please let me have this by myself. And I don't need
Yeah,
your
I think
opinion. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's so important because I haven't even thought about it that. But yeah, I think that a lot of times that's really all I want is just give me respect. You don't have to agree at you that you don't have to like it, but it's my life, so just give me respect.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
So what are some common challenges that vegans run into when sharing their messages and their passion around veganism with non-vegans?
Yeah, so big question. There's a lot, and I think that one big part of that is an issue that I see all the time in my marketing work as well, which is being able to understand the other person's worldview. So when I'm doing copywriting and I first sit down with a client, the first thing I do is ask them a lot of questions about their audience, not
Mhm.
about themselves and their own business. And when we're talking about veganism with other people, we need to do the same thing. You need to start with who are they and where are they coming from? And that's going to give you your first broad strokes of like, how do we even approach this conversation? So some people might be just totally hostile to it. The best you can hope for is that they're just gonna shut up. Like there's no way they're going to be supportive or like anything. So that's going to be a really, really different conversation than if someone is supportive, probably not ever going to be vegan themselves, but they are kind of warm and open about versus someone who does seem really curious about veganism, and is asking you questions and seems really engaged and open to learning more about it. So those are all really, really different conversations, and that's entirely the difference in the person you're talking to. And you want to get into, if you do decide to open a conversation where you're going to go a little bit deeper and share some more information about veganism, because the person seems receptive to that, or they've asked you why you're vegan or something like that. Uh, Another big thing to think about is what are their values? So again, it's very normal that human beings, we think about ourselves, what is my story? What are my values? What am I doing? I see this all the time with my clients where they're really focused on their own business. This is my offer. This is my thing. This is what I'm doing. But we need to flip it and think about, okay, what is this other person's values? What do they care about? What's going to like strike home for them? So for veganism, we have basically like three sort of pillars of values, which is ethical treatment of animals, better for the environment, and our own physical health as human beings. And those are all really different. Like that's a really different approach. That's a really different person you're talking to. So when you do get an opportunity to open that conversation, stop and ask yourself what's going to land best with this person? What do they care about? What's going to speak to their values and their wants and their focus? You're going to be so much more successful if you start any conversation with where is this person coming from and where are they standing?
Yeah, it's so important. You bring up a really great point is just being in that person's shoes, trying to see things through their lens. And I like how, because yeah, the messaging you would use in copywriting is so transferable for someone who wants to communicate a complicated message, right? Or any kind of message, but especially one that's complicated. Um, yeah, it's what are their values? What things are important to them? Maybe finding something to connect it to that's important to this person to help them understand, depending on what what your end goal is. And I think too, that's always the important thing too, is get clear with yourself of what do I want the outcome of this conversation to be? So if it's something as simple as respect, then it's like, how can you, based on the things that you just said, how can you communicate your need for respect and get that? So it always helps having that end goal in place.
Absolutely.
And then, what's that?
Absolutely. I mean, with communication, you got to know what you're communicating for. Communication serves a purpose. Otherwise, you're just chatting. So if you're communicating something, what is the purpose of that? And how can you best deliver that? If you don't know that purpose, then you can't make a good choice as to what to say.
Right, exactly. And I think Um, one of my favorite sayings is knowledge conquers fear. And then the more knowledge you have about something, it can help you overcome those fears and that overwhelm. So if you prepare yourself the best you can with various scenarios of a conversation, if you're doing a family gathering, for example, um, also, the biggest challenge that I have found communicating as a vegan is when people start asking me like various questions. Well, why is honey bad, right? Or fish? Do fish really feel anything? Do they really
Yeah.
count, right? Or, when it gets into dairy, well, you get all those different challenging conversations where then people start wanting facts. Some people want you to get into that. And then beginning that used to be really intimidating for me. And I used to sometimes not know how to answer some of those more complex um conversations when they would come up. But I feel like over time I've gotten better with that, especially reading information, like Earthling Ed Winters, like his YouTube channel, and he has a great book called How to Argue with a Meat Eater, which is really not about arguing with a meat eater. It's just how to have, he gives tips on having tactful debate in
Yeah.
there, and he breaks down each chapter is like all the different arguments people have. So there, I read this book over the summer because I realized I've been vegan now almost 8 years, and there are still certain moments where I would feel challenged when people start asking these because I didn't like I know it, but I just don't know how to like
Yeah.
explain it. So that book was really helpful for me over the summer to kind of like refine my communication skills. So I think like doing like research on some basic things that people like, I think one of the biggest ones is like protein, for example, like where you get your protein. I had a relative one time ask me about that, and his response was, well, that's not real protein. What are some tips that you have for when people have some of those more combative responses or where it feels like people are like trying to bait you into a more
Yeah.
angry response?
Yeah, so absolutely, that's going to come back to what is the purpose of this conversation?
Yeah.
Because this can definitely go both ways. Sometimes someone's asking those questions because they're genuinely curious. Sometimes
Mhm.
they're asking those questions because they're genuinely worried about you and they think this isn't healthy for you. Or sometimes they're asking it to be kind of obnoxious. And your response is going to really vary depending on those situations. Like, what is their approach? So again, what are they doing? And what is your objective? So if they're being obnoxious, I wouldn't even answer them. Like, you don't waste time on that. Same thing in marketing. If someone is hostile and not interested and totally never going to buy your product, you don't spend time talking to them and arguing with them. And if you're at a table and someone's just being really hostile and obnoxious, I would just be like, I'm not sharing this with you. You can look that up yourself. Like I don't
Yeah.
just and whatever you think and knowing based on what you know about that person, what's going to shut it down. Maybe humor is going to work, whatever. I know sometimes for the like, oh, you don't get any protein eating vegan is like, oh well, then I guess I'm dead. Like sometimes you just shut it down. So absolutely, that's always valid. And I think sometimes as new vegans, especially, we feel like we have to answer. You don't have to answer. If you judge this person is not being respectful, you are allowed to just say no. You are absolutely not going to convince someone like that to go vegan. You are not going to have a positive outcome. You are just going to get stressed out and they're going to push your buttons. If it's someone who is engaging in some sort of authentic way, whether that's out of concern for you or out of genuine curiosity or out of any openness to veganism, then again, you figure out what their perspective is, what their values are, what they're worried about and speak to that. So if it's like your mom who's genuinely worried that this isn't healthy for you, then you're going to talk about the health of veganism. And absolutely, like you said, arm yourself with knowledge ahead of time. You don't have to research for days and days and days, but just the basics. If it's, a friend or someone who's genuinely curious, then you can start shifting into doing a little bit of a pitch, your spiel, what is going to resonate with this person? Do they love pets? Okay, maybe talk about, how much you love your dog. Like pigs are just as great as that. And have a little spiel like that. Um, but it totally depends on your objective and on their objective in that conversation.
Yeah, those are all really great points. And yeah, it really depends on if people are curious. I have people in my life of all the categories.
Yeah, totally. We all do.
We all do, right? Like I have family who's really supportive when I'm coming over. They make sure there's like food for me. They're very like cool about it. They ask me questions. It's more of like curiosity and intention to understand. Then I've had the other stuff where I've used humor as a good thing, is like good. Like, even if I'm annoyed, if I can use like some sarcastic humor or something just to kind of diffuse the situation and then deal with my anger and frustration later. Um, and then also like setting a boundary too. Like there's been times where it's gotten too far and I've said to someone, you know what, I'm not pushing my veganism onto you. I respect what other people choose to do themselves, and I don't want to discuss this anymore. And just kind of shut it down that way. Like that's something I've done before. Like I'm not telling you what to do with your life. This is my choice,
Yeah.
and let's change the conversation now.
Yeah, and you're allowed to say that. I mean, that comes back to that people pleasing. That can be hard for us to say, especially for women, especially for anyone who does have that people pleasing tendency. But own it. And if anything, this is an opportunity for you to learn that. So many of us live with these people-pleasing tendencies for our
Mhm.
whole lives. I mean, we all know people in older generations who have just been kind of letting other people boss them around their whole lives. It's really sad. Um,
Yeah.
and if that's been you and this is the thing that's sort of putting your back against the wall and forcing you to set a boundary, maybe within a particular relationship, which might be for the first time. I know certainly for me as I was a young adult, and those were like early instances of me having to set boundaries with my parents and sort of practice that skill. That's a good thing. That's an opportunity. It's not going to be comfortable, but that's good for you just for your own personal development. Even if, completely unrelated to veganism. That is a good learning opportunity to set those boundaries.
I agree. Because I do a lot of boundary work with women, and it's like it's building a muscle, right? If you're training for a marathon, you're not, day one, you're not going to be able to run like a perfect run for that, right? You gotta train and build up for that. And the Olympians, right? Like in order to get themselves in a place to be able to enter the Olympics, they have to do a lot of training. And I
Mm.
feel like that's when it comes to building boundaries and just communicating your truth. And it took me a long time to realize and give myself permission to do things that felt right to me and disagree with people because disagreeing with people used to feel so wrong, like I'm doing something.
Yeah. Yeah.
What other people have to say is more important than what I have to say. Like that is my old mindset, and it took me a long time to get out of that. And so yeah, that can be challenging, but it takes time. And so I think it's really important to be kind to yourself with all of that, which I'm going to talk about. I want to bring up self-care in a moment. But before I do, what about when it comes to other vegans? I was just thinking about this because sometimes that can be another challenge, right? Where and there are vegans and that that can be very forceful about their messaging and it could really intimidate people. What are your thoughts on that when it comes to interacting with vegans who might be in a different place than another vegan?
Yeah, yeah. So obviously having friends who are vegan is wonderful. It's so supportive to have those relationships. I moved recently and one of the first people I met just happened to also be vegan and it's just been so nice. We like had Thanksgiving together as like a Friendsgiving thing and we were spent the whole time being like, this is so nice. Everything's vegan. I don't have to like deal with having one dish. Like it's awesome. It's awesome. And I absolutely encourage you to seek out those friendships or look for people who might share those values because it's wonderful to have that support. We all need community. With that said, veganism is intense, and I think that that's because of the nature of the topic. I mean, we're talking about a lot of violence against animals. We're talking about, big important issues for our environment, for our health. It's natural that people get really passionate and worked up about that. It's especially natural when you've just encountered it. Honestly, I think everyone, maybe I'm not gonna say everyone, but most vegans go through a phase where they have this like, holy heck, did you guys know all of this? And
Yeah,
you just have that like you're a little bit on fire. I mean, just speak to an example. I'm raising my daughter vegan. She's 4. And this Christmas when we were home with my parents was the first year where she's talked, she knows that like we don't eat animals and other people eat animals. She sort of looked around at everyone else on the table and was like, do you all hate animals? She's 4 years old. She doesn't have the communication skills yet, but she was like, she was, or she blew up. She was like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? Which was, very funny for me. have moments where you're like, oh, I need to handle this as a parent, but this is hilarious. Um, yeah, so I think we all have those moments. And that means that when you do encounter vegans, sometimes you're going to encounter someone who's just in a different place than you and does not click with you, especially if you are having a more gentle transition to veganism. I personally believe that that is a really transitioning gently helps you be vegan long term. That is my belief. I don't have a study to cite, but that is really what I feel is true. But some people are really hostile to it. And so tread lightly, share, be vulnerable with people you know you can trust.
Mhm.
And again, pay attention to that other person and what they're dishing out. I've had extremely awkward conversations, especially when I was a new vegan and trying to meet vegan friends with people who are just like, I don't know, doing on their own wavelength, doing their own thing. That's fine. That's about them. That's not about you. And you can go find other friends who are going to be a lot, click with you a lot better. So absolutely seek out friends with the same values as you, of course, but check them out first.
First of all, thank you for sharing the story of your daughter. I think that is really hilarious. Also a great teaching opportunity of like how we how we approach people who eat animals, but but it's so relevant to because when you have that, it's like an awakening. It's like it's like the Matrix, right? It's like when Neo like all of a sudden saw reality, right? When we finally open up and want to, are willing to acknowledge the cruelty in veganism. And there's, I think we just feel horrified on so many levels. Horrified on the fact that we used to think it was acceptable.
Mhm.
Horrified because people still think it's acceptable. And then just, and it's like you want to like change. You get really passionate about it, and it is very upsetting because it all ties in with our values, right? When things tie into our values, that's when we can feel happy and aligned or triggered or angry, right? If so our values, if we feel happy and aligned about something, then that means those things align with our values. If we feel triggered and angry, that means something poked up against one or more of our values. So then it's like I do a lot of value work in my coaching. And so it's like exploring, well, what are your values? And you can do that by what are the things that make you feel happy and aligned? What are the things that make you feel triggered and angry? And within all of those questions, you'll find what your values are. And once you know that, it can help you understand a little bit more of the mechanics of when we're having our emotions to something. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's I think yeah, it's very important just to and you can also just explain like that example of setting a boundary with someone, it's just saying, well, this is where I am with my journey right now, and that's it.
Yeah, that's it. And you like to speak to that and to make another comparison is that like comparison to marketing is that we always talk about like the customer journey, right? And you're not going to market to somebody who's just discovered you the same way you're going to market to someone who's like been in your world for a really long time. Um,
Hmm.
and it's the same way with veganism. You can't I like speaking to that part of us, what that moment where we're like, I'm gonna tell everybody, I'm gonna convert everybody to veganism, I'm gonna, like this is crazy. And you want to go out and like talk to all your friends and family. Um, you can't rush through that entire journey in one step.
Yeah.
And even if you did go vegan pretty quickly and it feels sort of like, oh, it just like clicked for me. I just had to hear it one time. I'm pretty sure that's not true. Like if you look back, you were exposed to it in different ways. You encountered different ideas. You touched on different things before it came together and you had that moment where you were like, oh, maybe this is the path for me. Um, and you have to let other people have that experience too. So like my approach now after 10 years, if I do encounter someone where I'm like, oh, like this, they're not hostile, like this is someone who might actually be interested, is I'm just one step on that journey for them. I don't have to do the whole journey in one piece. That would be like in marketing if I was like, I'm going to send one email to a total stranger and then they're going to buy my $1,000 course. Like, no, they're not. It's nurturing. And that conversation with me, if I meet an acquaintance or somebody, that's one step on this journey that they're taking, which might end up with them exploring veganism and might end up somewhere else. And I don't have control over that, but instead of feeling like you want to take someone all the way and like get them to that light bulb moment, if you feel like you've experienced some like, oh my gosh, I get it moment, um you're one piece of that. So try to, again, think about them, think about their values, think about their perspective. What do they know already? What do they understand already? Where are they in their understanding of veganism? And how can you just be that next step? How can you give them one more piece of information to consider, one resource, one perspective, break down one kind of misconception? Just do one step because things take time, and understanding something new, thinking about something new, and certainly changing your entire diet, that takes a lot of time. That doesn't happen in the course of one conversation.
I loved everything you just said. And yeah, knowing a few websites or some type of talk or just something simple, people may not be ready to watch a documentary, but like some article or website that fits somebody's concern or objection to veganism. For me, a lot of it's usually the health stuff. So my go-to resource is Forks Over Knives. I'll tell people go check out Forks Over Knives because they talk about all of the health benefits of veganism. There's a lot of science that backs that up with the China study. So I feel like Forks Over Knives is a great website, but it's also, they have great food tutorials and recipes on there. And that was one of the things that I discovered early on when I was looking to eliminate dairy was Forks Over Knives. And I did want to improve my health because there's diabetes and cardiovascular disease in my family. And so that was one of those early seeds for me, was even though I wasn't ready to commit to veganism, it created this awareness of, oh, I can make all this delicious food, not feel deprived, and I'm cooking better than I was before I knew about this. And so I feel like, because that's the thing, right? We're very protective of our food. We don't want to feel like we're missing out on good food. So I feel like Forks Over Knives is like one of my favorite go-to things. Even if somebody's like, oh, I'm looking for healthy recipes. Like one time I was on a Facebook group, um, that was not a vegan Facebook group, but someone was just asking for like healthy lunch recipes. So I went to Forks Over Knives, looked up, a bunch of like easy lunch ideas. It was like a list of like 40 quick lunch ideas. And I plunked the link in there. I answered their question, right? But I did it in a way that it's like planting the seed. And so I feel like if you can plant the seed showing people amazing recipes that also happen to be vegan, that's a great way to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And you don't have to do it all. You don't have to do this huge, spend an hour talking to them and completely change their mind. Like, do it one piece at a time and provide a bit of information if it's appropriate, if it's the thing they're looking for, right? You didn't be like, and also you should watch Earthlings. Like, answer where they are, talk to them where they are. And I mean, some of us end up deciding to go vegan, and that's because people were doing that for us. Even if we didn't notice it, people were doing that
Yeah.
for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Basically knowing your audience, even when it comes to your family, your friend, whoever you're hanging out with, um, communicating that message in a way where they're going to hear it and be able
Absolutely.
to respond to whatever it is to give you that outcome that you want to have, which again, as we were saying, that's why it's so important to know what the outcome is that you want when you have these engagements, because, and maybe pre-plan some potential boundaries. Like I've done that too, where it's like, okay, if this happens, this will be my boundary. If this happens, and this will be my, because I feel like the more prepared you are going into a situation, then the easier it is to navigate it.
Absolutely.
Um, what about what are some self-care tips that vegans can implement when feeling triggered and frustrated when they're communicating with non-vegans?
Yeah, very good question. I do think that it's really important to have someone in your life who's also vegan and who shares your values, which is hard if you're the first one you know who's done that. If that means sort of connecting online, having like a Facebook group or something where you can bring these conversations, that's great. As we've talked about it, sometimes, in any Facebook group, there's some crazies. That's true for any group of people. But I really, really do think it's great if you can have someone try to reach out and find someone who's going to be able to share that, who you can just be open with and share those frustrations without feeling like, oh, I'm going to offend them because they also eat meat. Um, that's a really big part. I think it's also really helpful to have an outlet for your activism if you decide that part of your vegan journey is going to be activism that isn't arguing with your family because that doesn't work. And I think I read somewhere that like the families of vegan people are the less likely to go vegan. Like you're more likely to convince like a friend or an acquaintance than you are, your sister, just for whatever reason. But
Interesting.
yeah, it's funny, but I saw that somewhere. So find an outlet for that. If you are in that phase where you're feeling really, really passionate and really, really frustrated and you want to tell the world, find an organization, find an outlet. If environmentalism is your approach to veganism, find an environmentalism group. Find a place for that energy that's going to be a lot healthier and more fruitful than ending up in conflicts with people around you who are simply never going to go vegan. Um, yeah. So that's a really big part of it. Community and having a healthy outlet for those passions and those ideas and that commitment as it arises for you.
I agree. I think, yeah, those are so important. And in beginning, it was me finding community online, or, there can be meetup groups. Maybe there's a meetup in your area where there's vegans that meet up. You could always create your own. Um, but yeah, just being online is a great place and finding that community. And then, yeah, volunteering, that's a really great tip because I feel like it gives you that outlet of, we want to make an impact. And so if you can volunteer at either an animal sanctuary or some other organization, it doesn't even have to be, like PETA. It could be, some other organization that helps animals, one-on-one like that, like a sanctuary. There's so many different ways to do that. So I like that tip. I think that's really great way to like channel your energy.
Mhm.
And, also just setting boundaries is self-care. And you don't have to engage in something that doesn't feel good to you. You can,
Yeah.
and I think again, it comes with that people pleasing. Like if you need to remove yourself from the situation, you remove yourself from the situation. If you want to stop talking about something, you don't have to continue talking about it. You have the right to do what it is that you need to do to help yourself through something, especially those big emotions that we feel. Um, yeah, and our needs can change over time too. I
Mhm.
just want to give a quick example because I'm the only vegan in my household, and we don't have a lot of vegan stuff. When I first became vegan, and our kids were younger, I was like, all right, I'll still make non-vegan stuff for them because I was the cook in the house. And now we're empty nesters. And so I told my husband I didn't really want to touch it or look at it anymore. It was really bothering me. And so I communicated that to my husband last year after we were empty nesters. I'm like, you know what? I just can't do this anymore in terms of touching, I'll do the grocery shopping. So if there's something I need to pick it up, fine, I'll pick it up, but I don't want to handle it anymore. I don't want to prepare it. And so I set that boundary and he was fine. I mean, there was some like, sarcastic joking involved, but and that's what we do. We have comedy with our differences, which helps. But if people care about you, they're going to respect what your needs are. And if there's a friend or a family member who can't respect your needs, then that's when it's might be time to kind of look at that relationship, like what's really going on there. Because if someone genuinely loves and cares about you, they're going to respect you and what you need. And so yeah, and that and your needs might change. Like again, with me having to communicate that. And it worked out fine. And everyone survived.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's also really important to have that self-love and self-respect for you, especially I know for both of us, like we had a really slow transition. A lot of people do that too. Some people might never fully be vegan, but really enjoy being vegan at certain times or eating more vegan food, which can be a tough place to be in. I think people in that situation often feel really isolated. You know, they're not fully welcome in the vegan community, but they are eating a lot of vegan food and looking into those resources. So just having that like self-love and self-respect for yourself, like wherever you are in your journey, that's where you are. You're doing what you can in this moment. There, are constraints on your life and stuff going on that's made you decide this is the best decision for you. And just, have that confidence, set that boundary. You're not gonna shame yourself or worry about yourself or think that so and so on the online thinks you're not a real vegan because you eat honey or, like just
Yeah.
like don't let that noise get in your head. You're making your decisions, and if you're doing decisions that are improving things for animals, for our environment, for your own health, those are positive decisions, and you don't need to justify that to anyone else. Um, which is so important because I really want everyone who's trying to eat more plant-based and trying to help animals to feel supported, whether or not they're fully 100% vegan, 100% of the time, um, which isn't necessarily something every single person needs or can do. So do what you can and have that self-love and self-compassion and pride in yourself for what you are doing to make things better.
Absolutely. I think that's also important. It's we forget, a lot of us women, we forget to prioritize ourselves. We feel like we have to be number one to everybody, and there can be shame when you disappoint somebody.
Mhm.
It's so much easier for us to disappoint ourselves than somebody else. And that only works for so long. Like there, you reach a point where you keep doing that and you keep doing that and you keep doing that, where it really starts to have an impact on you that's
Mhm.
unhealthy. So, yeah, it's so important to implement all of these things: communication, setting boundaries, getting clear on what your values are, and trying to honor them, and then, and then just all the points that you brought up about messaging too are just all very valuable things for people to consider when they're walking through this phase of life as a vegan or aspiring vegan, or I'm not sure if I want to be vegan, but I'm just kind of checking it out. Wherever you are, it's okay. And you're exactly where you need to be in this moment. And so that's really all you need to focus on in that time. I'm really enjoying our chat. Before we wrap up, what are some supportive resources you'd like to recommend to viewers?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So for me, I read a lot of books when I was getting started in my vegan journey, and I think that just that information really helped build that confidence for me. Like you said, knowledge overpowers fear, and knowledge is going to make it a lot easier for you to answer those questions and have those conversations that we've been talking about. So I would say whether it's books, it's podcasts like this one, or documentaries, just go out and absorb as much information as you can. Educate yourself. That's what's going to give you that confidence to have these conversations.
Absolutely, I agree. And then just maybe have a few websites in mind. So maybe have like a website for each main category, right? Have a website for environment, have a website in mind for animal cruelty, and have a website in mind for the health stuff. Like I mentioned before, I use forks over knives when people start asking me health questions.
Yeah.
Because if you don't feel like answering it, or if you don't know how to answer it, sometimes I'm like, you know what? That's a lot to explain, but here's a website I can send you
Yeah.
to. And so that way it also doesn't make it look like if you're not sure how to answer something, it's just like, that's just a lot to share, but here's a great website. So if you can have at least a website for each of those categories, it's something that something that would that person, something easy for someone to look at to get the point across. I think that also helps when you have a few things handy like that.
And if you have someone you know who's kind of trouble in your in your life and you know is going to argue, then you can absolutely prepare for that. Like that hard to argue with a meat eater. I'm super curious to check that one out. I read Animal Liberation, which is an old one,
Hmm.
back when I was becoming vegan, and that's also very like logical, philosophical, like structured arguments. That can help if you're feeling pressure or you're feeling disrespected or you're feeling like you get discombobulated to read something that's specifically about like, okay, let's structure this argument. Like let's really be really rational and argue it out. Um, that can help a lot.
Definitely. I just want to throw one other resource because I like to put the links to resources so in the video notes in case people want to check them out. Another great book along with the How to Argue with a Meat Eater. This is not anything about veganism, but it's called Setting Boundaries Will Set You Free by Nancy Levin. And it's got tools and resources and her own personal examples of people pleasing and how she overcame that. So it's a really great resource in just building the skill of setting boundaries. So I'm going to put the link to that book and How to Argue with a Meat Eater book in the notes below. So if anyone wants to check those out, they can. Well, before we wrap up, what's the best way for people to connect with you?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn as Cleoniki Kesidis. That's a good place to connect with you. If you want to connect with me professionally about marketing and copywriting, I'm at CEK Copywriting. And I've just jumped on Instagram with CEK Copy as well. So happy to connect with anybody there if you want to talk more about messaging and how to structure all of that. Um, and yeah, or we can just chat on LinkedIn anytime.
Awesome. I'll also put all those links in the notes below. Well, Cleonikki, thank you so much for stopping by today to have this really important conversation. I feel like it's so important to talk these different things. It's a very multi-layered experience we go through as vegans and transitioning vegans. So thank you again for having this important conversation with me. And I want to thank you all for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Bye for now.